Today on Ag News Daily.
Yeah, 10 to 20% higher resale values when you have that history. And you see the same thing in non-ag, so Carfax with automotive, same type of thing. I want to know what was done on a regular interval.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. My name is Tanner.
Thank you. My name's Delaney. Do you think people need an introduction?
We have new listeners joining us.
We do.
All the time.
We do. I picked up a few new ones last week and this week. So
I love it. Hey, listeners that are just joining us, I don't always look this nice, said Delaney this morning.
Well, it's true.
And the weather's not always this nice either. A system delivered widespread showers and thunderstorms throughout the Midwest through Thursday this week, and we have additional rain expected to move into the southern parts of the region over the weekend. That rainfall boosted early crop growth, but caused delays for farmers that were still planting. Cooler air that followed this system is likely to stick around into next week. While frost was limited, a few isolated areas saw patchy development. Temperatures are expected to rise as June approaches us. The Central Plains in Nebraska and western Kansas picked up much-needed moisture. However, the southern parts of that region still remained dry, showing signs now of increased dryness. The northern plains were also hit with several rounds of heavy rainfall midweek. In North Dakota, cold air brought a brief mix of snow on Tuesday night. Though little to no accumulation was reported, the precipitation did help ease some of those drought concerns and supported early season crop growth. Another wave of rain is expected into the weekend with a slow warming trend that will head into next week. I know we got too much rain here in central Iowa.
We did. A lot of places got too much rain. We're going to talk about that. But nonetheless, U.S. corn and soybean planting continued at a brisk pace last week, thanks to mostly favorable conditions across much of the Midwest and Plains. Farmers made strong progress ahead of expected widespread rain that we talked about. And according to the latest USDA crop progress report, 78% of the corn is now planted, well ahead of the 5-year average of 73%. Half of that corn has already emerged compared to 40% normally. Soybeans are also ahead of schedule with 66% planted, ahead of the 5-year average of 53%, and additionally 34% of those crops have emerged 11 points ahead of the 5-year average. Winter wheat ratings dipped slightly with 52% of the crop rated good to excellent, down 2 percentage points from last week, but still up from a year ago, and 64% of the crop has headed. Spring wheat planting also remains ahead of pace with 82% in the ground and 45% emerged, both above seasonal averages, Tanner.
That's correct. We did see coming out of the U.S. Secretary of Ag's office, Brooke Rollins took a trip to the Cornhusker State, unfortunately. Oh, just kidding. On Monday, she revealed and unveiled a new set of policy proposals that aimed at strengthening America's family farms, one of which was announced included the Family Farmer First Initiative, a key part of USDA's Make Agriculture Great Again agenda. Rollins said there's been a lot of talk on how we can keep America strong and restore prosperity in our rural areas. At the heart of all of it is our small family farmer. According to the USDA, 86% of U.S. farms are small family-run operations, and this initiative is aimed at supporting those folks. The initiative includes 10 new policy priorities, including simplifying USDA programs, improving access to credit, protecting farmland from solar development, and supporting generational farm transfers. Rollins also emphasized the need to address the ongoing farm labor shortage. She stated the USDA is working with the Department of Labor to review the H-2A visa program and find broader solutions to help farmers secure a stable workforce. Other key points that came in this plan include expanding business planning tools, improving access to education and risk management resources, updating the USDA's Small Farm Toolkit, and modernizing the farm size definitions to better reflect what today's operations are. Rollins also said the effort is about listening to farmers and delivering support that ensures a sustainable, prosperous future for the American agriculture sector. A lot going on in that announcement, and like I've said before, I feel like she at least is very transparent with the activities that her office is working on.
Very transparent. She's been a busy lady because also while she was in Nebraska, she approved the first of its kind waiver redefining eligible food purchases under Nebraska's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known, of course, as SNAP. Beginning January 1st of 2026, soda and energy drinks will no longer be eligible for purchase with SNAP benefits in the state. This move marks the first time a state has been granted permission to exclude specific food items based on nutritional value. Secretary Rollins called it a historic step to the Make America Healthy Again, praising Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen and other governors for taking bold action to improve public health. Governor Pillen said the change ensures taxpayer dollars are spent on nutritious foods, not junk food, and called the decision a tremendous step for the well-being of Nebraskans. Previously, SNAP recipients could buy any food except alcohol, tobacco, hot prepared meals, and non-food items. The waiver now adds soda and energy drinks to the list of exclusions. This policy aligns with the USDA's broader push to promote healthier eating, citing rising rates of prediabetes, chronic conditions in children, and soda consumption among teens. Secretary Rollins said the move is part of the agency's Laboratories of Innovation initiative, encouraging states to pilot creative solutions to long-standing health issues. And I know then later in the week we saw some MAHA activity as well, Tanner.
That's right. Corey, my co-host on Farm for Profit, and I got to be on a podcast, the 93 podcast with the governor of Nebraska. He's a fun guy. But yes, MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, released Commission's report, Making Our Children Healthy Again. Back in February, President Trump signed an executive order establishing the MAHA Commission to investigate chronic illness and deliver action plan for fighting childhood diseases. This is led, of course, by Health and Human Service Secretary RFK. The report included a variety of factors such as processed food, chemicals, stress, and overprescription of medicines and vaccines that may be a factor to chronic illness in children. Though no specific regulatory changes were called for in this report, it did highlight studies linking to health disorders in humans and animals to glyphosate and atrazine. Following the release, though, Bayer said some of the details in the report around pesticides were not fact-based. The American Soybean Association and many other ag groups were not supportive of this report and released a variety of statements on Thursday afternoon following its release. Most notably, that this report was fear-based rather than science-based information, especially about pesticides, positioning that they will sow seeds of distrust in the American public. The executive order that created the MAHA Commission also directed a second report providing policy recommendations that will be issued now in the next 80 days. We'll see more when that comes out, but fear-based is not good. We'd like to see fact-based.
We certainly would, and that's really been the sentiment amongst ag groups. Staying in line, though, with the food and beverage theme, wineries and small craft brewers may soon have good news for shipping products to their customers. It's called the United States Postal Service Shipping Equity Act, and it would allow U.S. Postal Service to ship alcoholic beverages to consumers. Congressman Dan Newhouse from Washington is supporting the legislation, a move he says would give small businesses more ways to reach their customers. Newhouse said, "This is a reintroduction of a bill I've backed. It gives small producers more options to get their products into the hands of consumers." Newhouse says the Postal Service is well suited for the job, especially in rural areas. They show up every day, he said. That makes them more accessible to small producers, not just in central Washington, but across the country. He says this would especially benefit small wineries and craft breweries struggling to compete in traditional retail spaces. And I think about some we even have here in the Metro Des Moines area, Tanner. Getting shelf space in grocery stores is tough for these small businesses, Newhouse added, and this legislation gives them another tool to connect directly with customers in a cost-effective way. So we'll see how that transpires.
Is the language suggestive? If the mail is there every day, should we be getting wine in the mail every day?
I think so, yeah.
We'll see more about that. The Chinese economy is bringing them to the negotiating table. There are signs of renewed movement in the U.S.-China trade negotiations, news that surprised some commodity analysts. China shared on Wednesday that trade talks with the U.S. were an important step towards bridging the gaps towards multilateralism and to find a way through the global trade turmoil currently being experienced. Arlen Sutterman, chief commodities economist at StoneX, says that China had initially entered tariff talks believing that it had the upper hand. China believed it could control the messaging, Sutterman said. They were betting that if they waited long enough, the U.S. public support for Donald Trump would fade and Congress would limit his ability to negotiate tough deals. That strategy has made them reluctant to come to the table up until now. But that calculation may be changing, Sutterman says. Troubling economic signals are continuing to emerge from China, with recently thousands of layoffs, falling factory orders, and rising debt levels as the government tries to stimulate their economy and retrain their workers. They're feeling the pain, Sutterman said. China is spending heavily to try and stabilize things and keep people employed, but they still see this as a long-term play that would put them as the world's top economic and military power. Backing down now, in their view, could mean slipping to irrelevance. While no deal has been reached, the shifting economic landscape may be pushing China towards a more serious negotiating posture. In the weeks ahead, we will look at the WTO Council and session at in Geneva this week. China called on a member of the states to stabilize trade relations and anchor trade measures under WTO rules. The U.S. called on members to address failures in commercial relations that had caused huge trade deficits and urged for a fast reform of the current WTO system. Just shy of 50 member countries sponsored a joint statement reaffirming their commitment to the support of a rules-based multilateral trading system. So it seems there may be a bit of a stalemate at this point, but we'll continue to keep an eye on it going forward.
Well, Tanner, as we think about the wet conditions we've been having this year, ear rot was amongst the most damaging corn diseases in 2024, contributing to major yield losses. And according to Syngenta's technical product lead, Tyler Harp, a few different strains of the disease cost producers over 70 million bushels in 2024. Over the past 5 seasons, those losses totaled nearly $1 billion. Harp says this year in particular, the key to protecting crops starts with an integrated approach, managing crop rotation and selecting tolerant hybrids and applying the right fungicide. He said these diseases depend heavily on environmental conditions. He recommends applying preventative chemicals at grain silking, the critical window to block the fungus from infecting silks and developing in the ear. Left untreated, ear rot can also lead to mycotoxin contamination. And this year, I think we're once again at accelerated or increased risk of ear rot.
Yeah, it sounds like that could be a rock band name. Mm-hmm. We did see a new survey from ag lenders in the upper Midwest show that net farm income is continuing to decline, with farmers also cutting back on capital spending. Joe Mahon of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis says that farm incomes in the 9th District, which include Minnesota and the Dakotas, parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, have been falling now for nearly 2 years. The outlook in spring is fairly pessimistic, Mahon said. With current crop prices and overall ag conditions, farmers aren't expecting much improvement in income. He also said producers are scaling back equipment purchases and other large expenses. Despite high interest rates, loan demand remains strong, driven by tighter cash flows and lower repayment rates. Additional takeaways from first quarter survey include the rise in household spending, higher land values compared to last year, and a drop in cash rental rates. We'll continue to keep an eye on that, but not a lot of good news out of that survey.
Well, late this week, the U.S. House passed a tax and spending bill by just a single vote margin. The proposed legislation will enact many of President Trump's campaign pledges, such as delivering tax breaks on various things and increasing military and border enforcements. The bill is estimated to add just shy of $4 trillion to the U.S. debt balance sheet over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. The bill will now head to the Senate, which is expected to be debated here post-Memorial Day recess. But as we think about this great 3-day weekend coming up, Tanner, you might be getting around the farm. You might be thinking about how to make my operation more effective, more process-based. We're chatting today with Tracy Widmeyer, the co-founder of Grip, an award-winning company that is making daily operations a whole lot easier for ag teams and their equipment. So let's jump into that conversation with Tracy now. Well, folks, it's been a little while since we've had kind of a Tech Tuesday focused interview, switching to now of a weekly podcast. But we're excited today to chat with Tracy Widmeyer, the founder of Grip, a new technology tool, amongst other things for growers. Tracy, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Tracy, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you started this really interesting and unique company, Grip.
Yeah, so my background has been technology for the last 20 years, venture capital, private equity, grew up as a software engineer. I think the unique thing about me is I also grew up on a farm. And so after college, leaving the farm, learning about corporate America, businesses, that sort of thing, I had an opportunity when Purdue was incubating the idea for Grip to get back to my roots in farming. And I own tons of equipment today, and the broader mandate for Grip with Purdue's process was basically equipment maintenance is underserved in ag. It's a very broad topic, and they bring in entrepreneurs, people who understand technology, typically from outside of ag, and say, can you help us solve this? We'll give you some funding, do your thing, go figure out the best solution and bring it to market. And so for me, it was just a journey back, to that process, understanding how to maintain equipment, what the purpose of that machine is or that piece of equipment is on the farm, and how valuable it can be. But it's got to be running, it's got to be maintained. I can open the back of my skid steer and look at Sharpie notes in the back cover on the filter. I'm way overdue for my maintenance, so I could understand exactly what farmers deal with on a daily basis. It's just getting harder with consolidation, more equipment, more locations, more people as well.
Yeah, I feel like turnover on a farm is higher, so those Sharpie notes may not mean the same thing to the next person as they do to the first.
Yeah, and even we still see a lot of paper books, right? And it's like, hey, I write this in the paper book. I'm like, great, you got to be near your truck first of all to grab that. Second, the guy who's on the farm 40 miles away has no idea what's in there. And you've got notes for not only the truck but the tractor and everything else, and it just becomes a mess and it's chaotic. And we see a lot of farmers will tell us, look, I'm looking for a way not to have to babysit my operation. Like, I trust my guys, I just want to empower them with information. And so we're trying to solve that in the most elegant, simple way.
Yeah, definitely a clear need for this challenge. We see it on our farm too, where my husband is really the only one who knows how to run the planter. If something were to happen, how do we kind of get through the next growing season? So I think it makes a lot of sense for continuity and whatnot. But Tracy, in practice, how does the platform that you guys have built work?
So we basically use QR codes. I'm holding some up here. We got big stickers, little stickers, PVC cards that can be zip tied to something that's sort of non friendly to a sticker, magnets, that sort of thing. That becomes a bridge from that physical thing into this digital profile we build up over time. And that profile will look a lot like social media or a Facebook profile for that tractor, truck, center pivot, whatever it is. It's got a lot of pictures, a lot of anniversaries and dates and documents, conversations. We've seen maybe one or two farms have any sort of history for that. Typically, history is a picture of that paper book we talked about, or trying to transcribe some notes from memory. And so we get in quick. Setup is very easy. Take a picture, give it a name, slap the sticker on, you're ready to go. And now you build over time. And there's no pressure, to have to look up history and all the information that some of these other platforms do. And then, your team is immediately able to scan, log important notes. You mentioned your planter, calibration history, notes, tribal knowledge, reminders, when you're trying to figure out when to do that service or what that manual or service interval should look like in the PDF the manufacturer gives you.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to note is you don't have to have a login. You don't have to have an email address or a Facebook account to do it. You scan the QR code and it's really simple, so you don't have to worry about what is my password to even log into this app.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just what's the password. It's like, what's the password to iTunes to get to, let alone then a password to log in. And so we've enabled the ability for anybody to contribute to that profile, which is great for seasonal folks. Who come and go, people that maybe not work for you full time, they're hauling grain or aggregate or whatever it is. 2 or 3 taps, they can contribute information they're seeing and really be that canary in the coal mine for your eyes and ears on the operation.
I've talked with many auctioneers about how you can inflate or establish the highest value for an asset when you go to sell it. And one of the things they mentioned was having the service history. It produces a lot of trust on the buyer side. Have you been seeing that with the clients that it's paid off?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 10 to 20% higher resale values when you have that history. And you see the same thing in non-ag. So, Carfax with automotive, same type of thing. I want to know what was done. Was it done, on a regular interval? And I think further than just resale values, we've been talking a lot about, lenders and credit risk with ag. It's a difficult subject nowadays. And what lenders will tell us is, look, when we look at the risk profile of a farmer, if you can't maintain the stuff that you already own and have already paid for, you're probably having other issues on the farm that prevent us from giving you a loan. They're a credit risk for us. And so we look at systemic risk across the whole farm, and that's just a little piece of it, but it's a window into how you run your operation.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have even thought about that angle, really.
It is. Now I'm curious, though, how do I pay for it? Do you pay by the QR code? Do you pay a subscription fee? What's it look like?
Yeah, it's a monthly subscription. We try to keep pricing really simple, so no user costs. Bring your whole team. We recognize if you can't get data into the system, like the fanciest piece of software is worthless, and so it's just small, medium, large buckets of QR codes that we ship out. 2,500 and 250 QR codes. We have tiers in between there, but ends up being a couple dollars a month per piece of equipment. And so very simple to get started, month-to-month pricing. Farmers love it. I always tell them, look, if in month 2 it doesn't do what I say it does, don't pay me. That's totally fine. We stand behind it. We've seen 0 customers leave us in the 15 months we've been in business, and growing usage, and we know we're hitting that emotional note for them, and we love seeing that progress.
Yeah, so Tracy, you've started to allude to some of the things that you can track and scan within the platform, but how robust is it? What are all maybe the different crops or livestock or equipment types it hits as well? Give us a little bit more detail there.
Yeah, so we started with rolling stock, but pretty quickly, farmers are saying, look, I have trouble tracking everything I own. It's not just the stuff on tires. And so power units, center pivots, we even do, for some of our apple and cherry growers, we've got one that does cherry disease tracking. So they walk through their little acre plot. If they see blight or, pesticide issues, they'll lop off the limb, tag the tree, and then they got to send that in the lab for a report. And they're trying to keep those notes on a clipboard and then put it into a Excel sheet or a cell. And so now pictures, commentary in their phone, they're speaking into it. They could just get a lot of information there. We also have like electronic forms that we've recreated. So OSHA inspections, food safety, lots of different things, that allows the farmer to not get, an app for this, an app for, the green stuff, an app for the red stuff, food safety, grain hauling, all these types of things, which traditionally they just don't do. So it's pretty flexible by design and on purpose.
Do you have any QR codes in the design of an ear tag? Because I'm thinking immediately of, vaccination records or treatment records in our cow herd.
Yeah, we do not yet, but we're working on it with a couple of early adopters. We get that question all the time. There's quite a few livestock and dairy apps out there. One of the unique things for us is the conversations that we allow around those things, whether you're looking at, an eye infection on, one of your cattle or, milking cows. We allow those conversations to happen. We do the automatic translations in there. So you're breaking down the language barrier and allowing you to track that along with everything else you have to keep tabs on. So, again, that concept of not having to flip between 4 or 5 different apps.
Well, Tracy, you guys have, speaking of innovation, been quite the innovators yourself. You've received quite a few different awards. I think the way I actually was exposed to GRIP is you guys won a big award through American Farm Bureau Federation earlier this year. Walk us through a little bit of that commercialization adaption journey. I think you mentioned earlier where you're kind of at here in the business journey.
Yeah, I mean, we've won a couple of awards, as you've said. It's been a proud moment for us because most of these awards have been judged by farmer panels, and so in other places I've been in, you get awards, basically by people that aren't really in the industry, and so this has been very, very beneficial for us. I think for us, we launched about 15 months ago. We raised a little bit of capital this spring to continue to build, and we're trying to use it as an opportunity to get the cash break even. and which means for us, like every customer matters. So we surround them with a wet blanket, if you will, of support. We give them access to us right in the app. We're on about 70 plus farms at this point. Some large apple growers, dairy, row crop, large co-ops, that type of thing. And we'll continue to push forward through that, looking at awareness campaigns. We just partnered with the Van Trump report. We've got a few more partnerships in the works to try to spread, the awareness, because our costs are too low for me to walk every farm as much as I would love to sell them directly. We have to look at how to scale that and then, get to sustainability as fast as we can.
That's great. Well, we appreciate you taking the time this morning to share with our audience your story. And if they are curious about your product, how best do they go and learn about it themselves?
Yeah, they can go to our website. It's GRIP, GRIPP.ag. We've got ingestion forms. They can text me right on the website there. Give me a call. Happy to help in any way.
Great. Well, Tracy, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to see how GRIP continues to roll out in the marketplace.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was a fun conversation, Delaney. But over the next several weeks, the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service will be conducting its annual June agricultural survey. Nearly 92,000 producers across the country will be contacted to report crop acreage and stock levels as of June 1. Producers can respond on their own online or through the phone or by mail. The survey talks about planted and harvested acreage, including biotech crops as well as grain stocks. Parsons emphasized that all individual responses are kept confidential and only reported in aggregate to protect producer privacy. Survey results will then be released on June 30th in the USDA's acreage and grain stocks reports and will also feed into other key USDA publications, including crop production, land values, and and livestock reports. The fertilizer, however, taking a look at where a quick update is coming from Josh Linville. The latest fertilizer media update has China's urea exports remaining well below normal at just 262,000 tons so far this year, compared to the typical 5 to 5.5 million. The U.S. New Orleans urea prices are spiked now in the mid 500s before falling back to the upper 400s. Fast planting pulled demand early. With imports now arriving, the peak may be behind us. UAN remains tight, as that supply, though, could improve by the end of June. China's phosphate exports are also falling short, projected at just 6.6 million tons this year. India's next urea purchase tender is also generating buzz, with the market chatter pointing likely at a return in either May or early June. Tight supply from China, renewed demand from India are setting the stage for challenging pricing environments ahead. The corn-to-phosphate ratio is the second worst on record, with the worst being in 2008. The potash market remains quiet, with buyers holding back and producers working to support prices. But Delaney, what did we see happening in other markets this week?
Yeah, well, ahead of the 3-day weekend, of course, markets are going to be closed on Monday for Memorial Day, and the markets have certainly seen mixed trade this week. And as we look to the Eastern Corn Belt in particular, some growers are sharing this is one of their worst years for getting the crop in the ground and their early start to the growing season. As Carl Setzer with Consus Ag shared in the daily newsletter, replants this season don't pencil out. So the question becomes, do we see abandoned acres this year? And if so, how many? That could certainly be a story the markets may lean into here in the short term. Adding to the mixed trade this week, China has been seeing some serious booking with Brazil. 18 vessels of soybeans were booked out of Brazil this week, 12 of which earmarked for 2026, so really making those long-term commitments now. Officials from the U.S. and Japan are set to kick off another round of trade talks today, but with markets closed for the next few days, we may not see much of a reaction to any progress until next week, including 50% tariffs on all goods coming from the EU was announced on Friday morning by President Trump. In the feeder cattle markets, the current price levels were tested this week as feeder cattle were $4 to $8 lower, signaling that the market is probably going to be unwilling to pay for feeders at these higher levels. So will we see a pullback here long term in feeder cattle is yet to be seen, but still at some of the most historically high levels that we've seen here in quite quite some time, Tanner.
That's right. Well, Delaney, that was great set of headlines for us this week. How about this weekend? Any big plans?
I don't think we have too much going on. What about you? Maybe grilling out?
Yeah, we have a lot of travel ball that has happened this summer, so this is a weekend free of that. So probably just some R&R.
Yeah, it's always good to get that. And maybe weather isn't going to be quite as nice as we had hoped previously, but nonetheless, hopefully if you're in the field still, you get some final planting progress made this weekend, or have some R&R, as you said there, Tanner.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But listeners, we appreciate you joining us every week. So until next time, should we let the listeners go?
Let's let them go.